The year is 1654. A Dutch merchantman, the Vliegende Hond, vanishes into the uncharted waters off Borneo. No wreck, no survivors, no distress. Only a cryptic, chilling entry in a recovered logbook. The wood breathes, it swells. God help us, it consumes. Imagine a ship, not rotting, not breaking apart, but growing. Its timbers, once lifeless oak, erupting with an unnatural vitality, fusing into grotesque, organic forms, sealing its crew inside a living, expanding tomb. This is the horror of the wooden fever. This is the maritime mystery that defies every law of nature and nightmares. The hook left us with a fragment of terror, but the full horror, the chilling, impossible truth, began to surface with a single, water-damaged logbook, discovered decades later, half buried in the silt of a forgotten Bornean bay. Its pages, miraculously preserved against the ravages of time and salt, detailed the final, impossible voyage of the Vliegende Hond. This wasn't a common record of a shipwreck or a skirmish. This was a descent into an organic nightmare. According to the salvaged fragments, authenticated by later naval historians as a genuine ledger from the Dutch East India Company's meticulous archives, the log began with the typical meticulous entries of a merchant vessel: cargo loaded, course set, weather observations. But then, as the Vliegende Hond pushed deeper into the uncharted, fevered waters off Borneo, the tone shifted. August 14th, 1654. Latitude 4 degrees, longitude 113 degrees. Vessel becalmed. Strange, luminous patch of weed observed clinging to hull. Attempts to dislodge unsuccessful. Wood, by its very nature, rots. It splinters. It dies. But the Vliegende Hond defied this fundamental law. Its timber, the very bones of the ship, began to live. Captain Willem van der Velde, a man known for his stoicism, penned entries that descended from professional observation into raw, unbridled terror. August 17th. The weed persists. Odd discoloration on the mainmast. A faint green hue, almost like nascent moss. Unnatural warmth emanates from the deck planks. A subtle vibration felt through the sole of the boot. This was not rot. This was transformation. The initial evidence, stark and undeniable, painted a picture of a ship becoming something else entirely, something alien. The mystery of the Vliegende Hond is not just a tale of the lost, but of the transformed. It challenges our understanding of life, of wood, and of the ocean itself. If you're ready to unravel this impossible narrative, to join us in dissecting the chilling evidence that followed, then secure your position on deck, like this video, and subscribe to our channel. The deep holds more secrets than you can imagine, and we're just getting started. The entry from the Vliegende Hond's log, detailing the bizarre transformation of its own timbers, was a terrifying anomaly. But to understand how a Dutch merchantman came to be entangled with such a horror, we must first understand the era. The mid-17th century was the zenith of the Dutch Golden Age, propelled by the formidable engine of the Verenigde Oostindische Compagnie, the VOC, the Dutch East India Company. This was no mere trading firm. It was a sovereign power, commanding armies, negotiating treaties, and charting territories with an insatiable, almost rapacious hunger for wealth. Their relentless push eastward, beyond established shipping lanes and into the whispering unknown, was driven by the intoxicating promise of undiscovered spice islands, untapped resources, and routes that would shatter their rivals' monopolies. Borneo, a vast, enigmatic island shrouded in dense, impenetrable jungles, was a particular target of this ambition. Its interior held rumored gold and rare woods. Its coasts, uncharted bays that promised safe harbors and new, lucrative trade networks. The VOC's directives were clear: explore, exploit, expand. It was this very mandate that sent the Vliegende Hond, a stout but unremarkable merchant vessel, on its fateful deviation. Captain van der Velde, like so many of his contemporaries, was under immense pressure. Pressure to find new, faster passages, to scout for hidden resources, to push the boundaries of the known world for the company's burgeoning empire. This was not a pleasure cruise. This was an expedition of calculated risk. Each nautical mile deeper into the unknown, a gamble against the vastness of the ocean and its myriad, often terrifying, secrets. Their presence in those fevered waters off Borneo was no accident. It was the direct consequence of a global enterprise reaching for the very edge of discovery. They sailed into a realm where the maps ran blank, where local legends spoke of spirits and monstrous life, and where the natural world itself seemed to operate by different, more primal rules. The luminous patch of seaweed that first clung to the Vliegende-Hond's hull was not an act of random misfortune. It was an encounter born of aggressive exploration, a collision between human ambition and an ancient alien ecosystem lurking in the untouched depths. The vessel had sailed into the unknown, and the unknown had begun to consume it from the very wood of its being. The sea lay flat, a sheet of hammered bronze, under the merciless equatorial sun. Not a breath of wind stirred the sails of the Vliegende-Hond, leaving her becalmed, a painted ship upon a painted ocean. It was in this oppressive stillness, this suffocating calm, that the anomaly first made itself truly known. According to Captain van der Velde's increasingly agitated entries, the ship had drifted into a vast, luminous patch of what appeared to be seaweed. But this was no ordinary marine flora. It was an entity of impossible scale and unsettling beauty. "The water around us, sir. It glows." A lookout is said to have cried, his voice trembling not with fear, but with awe. The patch stretched for leagues, a shimmering emerald green carpet that pulsed with its own inner light, casting an eerie phosphorescent glow on the ship's hull, even in the blinding daylight. Initial attempts to dislodge it were met with baffling futility. Grappling hooks snagged, but the weed tore free, its strands impossibly strong, its texture like no plant they had ever encountered, both slimy and fibrous, with a strange, almost muscular resilience. Long poles pushed against it, only to find it clinging to the oak planks with an unnatural tenacity, as if adhering to the very molecular structure of the wood. August 14th, 1654. Supplement. This weed, it binds. Like 1,000 unseen ropes, our axes glance off its fibers. It is not of this world. The crew, hardened sailors though they were, grew uneasy. This wasn't a drift of sargassum. This was a living blanket that seemed to embrace the ship, drawing it deeper into its glowing heart. It hummed with a low, almost imperceptible vibration, a resonance that transmitted through the hull, up the mast, and into the soles of their boots. The air around the Vliegende-Hond grew heavy, thick with a strange, sweet, earthy scent, like a primeval forest floor, but with an underlying metallic tang, a whisper of something ancient and alive. This was the critical juncture. The entanglement was not an accident of nature. It was an active, binding embrace. And from the moment that luminous, tenacious mass clamped onto the Vliegende-Hond, the ship's fate was sealed. It had become a host, unknowingly sailing into the domain of a biological entity that would soon reveal its true, horrifying purpose. The insidious transformation began subtly, a creeping horror that initially defied rational explanation. Within days of the Vliegende-Hond's entanglement in the luminous weed, the crew noticed the first unsettling signs of what Captain van der Velde, in his log, would chillingly dub the fever. August 18th, the oak of the main deck, she feels different, thicker. The seams, once clean, now pressed tight, almost bulging. A faint, sickly green, like the algae on a long sunken wreck, has begun to bloom across the grain, pushing from within. This wasn't merely the expansion of wood under the equatorial sun. This was an internal process. Planks that had been meticulously fitted for years now seemed to sigh, to swell, their familiar lines blurring, as the very fibers of the oak began to thicken, to engorge. The deck, once a reliable, unyielding platform, developed a peculiar, almost spongy resilience underfoot. It was as if the ship itself was breathing, its wooden lungs slowly inflating. Sailors, accustomed to the familiar creaks and groans of a working vessel, found themselves stepping on a surface that felt unnaturally warm. Not the heat of sun-baked timber, but a low, persistent internal warmth, a fever radiating from the depths of the hull. "It's like the ship's got a heart, beating hot beneath us," one anonymous crewman is recorded. as having muttered in an accompanying, informal ship's journal later found with the log. This warmth was most pronounced near the areas where the luminous seaweed had clung most tenaciously. The green discoloration, initially dismissed as surface algae, began to deepen, tracing faint branching patterns across the timber, like the nascent veins of a living organism. This was the first phase of the invasion, a silent biological insinuation, turning the very structure of the ship against its purpose. The Vliegende Hond was no longer merely a vessel, it was becoming a host, its wooden skeleton reanimating with a horrifying alien life. The fever escalated with terrifying speed, a biological nightmare unfolding in real time. What began as subtle swelling and discoloration quickly spiraled into a grotesque, irreversible transformation. The Vliegende Hond was no longer merely warm or discolored, it was actively, violently growing. August 21st, the masts, they twist, they writhe. New growths, like thick, gnarled branches, sprout from the mainmast. The deck, it is no longer flat. Ridges, like ancient roots, push upwards, splitting the caulking. The ship moans. The ship's skeletal structure, its proud masts and sturdy spars, began to contort. The straight, true lines of seasoned timber buckled and warped, erupting into knotty, gnarled outgrowths that mimicked the chaotic branching of an ancient, monstrous tree. These were not mere splinters or stress fractures. These were new, living extensions, pushing outwards with an unstoppable, silent force. The very fabric of the ship was reweaving itself, replacing the rigid geometry of naval architecture with the wild, organic chaos of a primeval forest. Below deck, the horror deepened. The internal spaces, the crew's cabins, the cargo holds began to shrink. The planking of the hull, once a protective barrier, expanded inwards, fusing together, swallowing the very air within. Walls pushed inward, decks bowed, and the familiar, comforting spaces became claustrophobic, then terrifyingly confined. August 23rd, the hold, sealed. The wood has grown shut like a wound closing. We hear men trapped below, their cries muffled by the living wood. The air grows thin. It is a prison. This was the chilling, active phase of the wooden fever. The ship was sealing itself, transforming into an impenetrable, organic monolith. The Vliegende Hond was becoming a living prison, its own timbers turning against its human occupants. The screams of the trapped, muffled by the ever-thickening walls of living wood, would have been a horrifying symphony to the remaining crew above deck, a constant, agonizing reminder of their impending, shared doom. The ship was no longer just a vessel, it was an entity, consuming itself, and in doing so, consuming its crew. The ship's horrifying transformation was not merely external. The fever raged within, turning the Vliegende Hond into a monstrous, self-sealing coffin. What began as a subtle swelling of planks now manifested as a relentless, inexorable encroachment upon every internal space. August 24th, the lower holds, silent. The wood has grown into itself, a solid mass. No crevice remains. We hear no sound now. Only the groaning of the ship as it continues to consume its own emptiness. The meticulously crafted bulkheads, the sturdy deck supports, the very framework of the vessel mutated. Timbers thickened, not through added material, but by expanding from within, pressing against each other with immense organic force. The spaces between planks, once sealed with tar and oakum, now fused, the wood fibers interweaving into a seamless, impenetrable barrier. It was as if the ship's internal organs were calcifying, turning to solid, living stone. The cargo holds, once cavernous and bustling, were the first to be obliterated. The Vliegende Hond was a merchant vessel, laden with goods destined for Europe. Now those precious commodities, spices, silks, porcelain, were crushed, absorbed, or simply entombed within the rapidly expanding wooden mass. The crew, already in a state of growing panic, watched helplessly as their escape routes, their access to supplies, and even their fellow sailors in the lower decks were irrevocably sealed off. The most terrifying consequence, however, was the diminishing air. As the internal volume of the ship rapidly decreased, the breathable air became a precious, finite resource. Ventilation shafts, once open to the sea air, were clogged and sealed by the burgeoning growths. Cabins became suffocating pockets, the air growing heavy, stale, and thick with the strange, earthy scent of the fevered wood. Crewmen found themselves gasping, their lungs burning, their minds reeling from the dual assault of claustrophobia and oxygen deprivation. The Vliegen de Hond was not just growing, it was breathing. And in doing so, it was systematically suffocating its own occupants. The silence from below decks, where men had been trapped, was now the most chilling sound of all, a testament to the ship's complete and final organic victory. The crew of the Vliegen de Hond were not men to succumb meekly to fate. They were hardened sailors, accustomed to battling storms, leaks, and mutiny. But this enemy, this silent, living growth, defied all their experience. Their fight was desperate, futile, and heartbreakingly human. Their initial response was instinctual: attack the growth. Axes, the universal tools of a shipwright, were brought to bear against the swelling timbers. Strong arms swung, blades bit into the fevered wood, chips flew. But the oak, once so yielding to their tools, now possessed an unnerving resilience. The blows that should have cleaved planks merely bounced, or sunk into a fibrous, almost rubbery mass, making a sickening, muffled thud. August 25th. Our axes dull. The wood, it heals, faster than we can cut. A gash made on the main deck last night already half closed. It mocks us. The most terrifying aspect was the regeneration. A gash hacked into a bulging plank would, within hours, begin to close, the wood fibers knitting themselves back together, sealing the wound with impossible speed. Where a mast had been partially severed to halt a grotesque branch, the branch simply grew anew, thicker, more defiant. It was a living, breathing paradox. A ship that repaired itself not to survive the sea, but to consume its own interior. Panic, a far more corrosive force than any storm, began to spread through the surviving crew. Men, once disciplined and resolute, now moved with a frantic, desperate energy, their eyes wide with disbelief and terror. Some screamed curses at the possessed timber, striking it with bare fists until their knuckles bled. Others huddled, whispering prayers, their faces pale with a despair that deepened with every creak and groan of the transforming vessel. The ship became a labyrinth of diminishing returns. Cabins, once private refuges, were now shrinking cells. Men found themselves trapped, sealed inside by walls that relentlessly pressed inward. The frantic cries of those entombed would echo through the ever-thickening bulkheads, growing fainter until silence descended, heavy and absolute. The Vliegen de Hond was not merely a ship under siege. It was a living entity, methodically, horrifyingly, burying its crew alive within its own growing flesh. Their fight was against the very substance of their world, and it was a battle they were doomed to lose. The Vliegen de Hond ceased to be a ship. What emerged from the fevered waters of Borneo was not a vessel, but a monstrous, organic sculpture, an unrecognizable husk adrift on the indifferent ocean. This was the final, horrifying apotheosis of the wooden fever. The proud lines of the Dutch merchantmen, once a triumph of human engineering, were utterly obliterated. The mainmast, once a towering pillar, had twisted into a grotesque, multi-branched spire, its wood fibers fused and gnarled, resembling the petrified limb of some ancient deep-sea tree. The rigging, if any remained, was absorbed into the burgeoning mass or snapped and fell away, leaving no trace of sails or lines. The hull, which had once cleaved the waves with purpose, was now a seamless, bulging monolith. The individual planks that formed its skin had expanded, warped, and melded into a single, calcified mass, dark and slick, pocked with strange, root-like protuberances and smooth, almost leathery patches. Portholes, hatches, gangways, every aperture that once offered egress or a glimpse within were swallowed, sealed shut by the relentless growth, leaving no seam, no weakness. The ship's once distinct deck was now an undulating, ridged surface, like the back of some titanic, slumbering beast, its former flat expanse consumed by organic undulations. The beast has swallowed its own heart, A later speculative analysis from a 19th century maritime scholar, Dr. Elias Thorne, would darkly surmise in his unpublished notes, it became a self-contained tomb, a monument to a terror beyond human comprehension. No longer did it sail, the Vliegen de Hond, now simply the monolith, in the hushed whispers of later fearful mariners, drifted. It was a dark, silent, self-contained entity, propelled only by the whims of current and tide, its trajectory a meaningless meander across the vast, empty canvas of the ocean. Its presence was a chilling paradox, a ship that had become more alive than any vessel had a right to be, yet utterly devoid of the life it once contained. It was an organic ghost, a wooden leviathan, carrying its entombed secrets across the world's forgotten currents, its very existence a profound, unsettling question mark etched into the annals of the deep. Centuries after its disappearance, the Vliegen de Hond, or what remained of it, re-entered the realm of human knowledge, not as a wreck, but as an enigma. The year was 1887. The British clipper Sea Serpent, on a routine passage through a rarely traversed stretch of the Pacific, far west of the Galapagos, sighted an impossible derelict. Captain Alistair Finch, a man of precise observation and iron nerve, recorded the event in his ship's log with an almost clinical detachment that barely masked his profound disquiet. October 12, 1887, sighted derelict at 800 hours, appears unnatural. No masts, no rigging. Hull form defies known naval architecture. As the Sea Serpent drew closer, the crew stared, their initial relief at a possible salvage turning to a chilling awe. This was no ordinary ghost ship. It was a dark, monolithic mass, impossibly smooth in places, grotesquely gnarled in others. The familiar lines of a ship were utterly absent. Where a bow should have cut the waves, there was a blunt, rounded protuberance. The stern was a seamless, bulbous curve. The entire structure appeared to have been sculpted from a single, vast piece of dark, polished wood. Yet it was clearly man-made in its origins, if not its final form. "The deck is not a deck," Finch wrote. "It is a ridged, undulating surface, like the back of some great petrified leviathan. No hatches, no companionways. All sealed." Attempts to hail the derelict were met with silence. No flag, no sign of life. Finch ordered a longboat lowered. His men, though seasoned, approached the silent hulk with palpable unease. They tried to board, to find any entry point, but the hull, once a patchwork of planks, was now a seamless, impenetrable wall of a substance that was undeniably wood, yet possessed the density and resilience of stone. Axes, brought for emergency entry, merely scraped and dulled against its surface. The substance was fibrous, dark, and utterly devoid of the familiar grain or joints of ship timber. It felt alien beneath their hands. The most unsettling aspect was the complete absence of any opening. The Vliegen de Hond had become a sealed sarcophagus. Its holds, its cabins, its very interior were choked and obliterated by this relentless internal growth. The Sea Serpent crew noted bizarre, root-like tendrils that seemed to have erupted from the derelict's sides, now withered and black, clinging to its monstrous bulk. They spent hours circling the silent, drifting behemoth, their minds struggling to reconcile its impossible reality with their understanding of the world. This wasn't a wreck, it was a transformation, a ship consumed by its own material, a living prison that had perfectly fulfilled its terrible purpose. The Sea Serpent eventually left the anomaly to its silent drift, carrying with it not salvaged goods, but a profound, lingering question. A question that would only begin to find its terrifying answer when the water-damaged logbook of the Vliegen de Hond finally surfaced, decades later, offering a chilling narrative to the silent, impossible monument found adrift in the vast Pacific. The discovery of the Vliegen de Hond's logbook and the later sighting of its monolithic derelict ignited a profound scientific curiosity that persists to this day. How could wood, a dead material, not only resist decay, but actively grow and transform into a seamless, stone-like mass? Modern marine biologists and material scientists grappling with the impossible narrative have put forth several unsettling hypotheses. One leading theory posits an extreme, hyper-aggressive parasitic marine microorganism, not a fungus that causes rot, but one that induces rapid, uncontrolled cellular division and material conversion within the wood itself. Dr. Alistair Vance, a theoretical microbiologist at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography, once described it as a biocalcifying agent of unprecedented virulence. Imagine an organism that doesn't consume wood for energy, but rather repurposes its cellulose and lignin, rapidly synthesizing it into a denser, stronger, and more expansive material. This could explain the internal swelling and the seamless fusion of planks, the parasite compelling the wood to grow itself into an entirely new alien structure. The luminous seaweed that initially clung to the Vliegen de Honde could have been the carrier, a symbiotic host, or even a precursor to this terrifying phenomenon, releasing spores or enzymes that initiated the fever. A second hypothesis explores a unique form of rapid biomineralization. We know that certain organisms, like corals or some bacteria, can extract minerals from seawater and deposit them to form hard structures. What if, in the isolated, nutrient-rich waters near Borneo, an undiscovered form of this process occurred, but one that operated upon organic matter, specifically timber? This agent, perhaps a specialized bacterium or archaea, could have triggered an accelerated conversion of the ship's wooden components into a biomineral, turning the flexible, cellular structure of wood into a rigid, expanding, almost geological substance. This would account for the stone-like resilience encountered by the sea serpent's crew and the total obliteration of internal spaces. The wood didn't rot, it petrified itself from the inside out at an impossible rate. The rarity of such an event suggests several possibilities. The microorganism or biomineralizing agent was hyper-specific to the Vliegen de Honde's particular timber or its unique chemical treatment. It required an extremely precise set of environmental conditions, temperature, salinity, nutrient availability, found only in that fleeting moment in the uncharted Bornean waters. Or most chillingly, the organism perished with its host, its terrifying life cycle complete, leaving behind only the evidence of its monstrous work. Even with these scientific frameworks, the reality remains profoundly disturbing. The Vliegen de Honde was not merely a victim of the sea. It was a victim of an unknown biological process that turned its very essence against itself. It compels us to confront the unsettling truth that the ocean, in its deepest, most isolated pockets, may harbor forms of life or biological processes that defy our understanding and challenge the very definition of natural law. From a single chilling log entry to the discovery of an impossible derelict, the saga of the Vliegen de Honde pulls back the veil on a terror far more insidious than any storm or sea monster. This was not a shipwreck. This was a metamorphosis. A proud merchantman, caught in the grip of an unknown force, became its own tomb, its timbers not rotting but growing, sealing its crew within an ever-shrinking, living prison. We have traced the fever's progression, from the luminous, tenacious seaweed to the planks that swelled and warmed, the masts that twisted into grotesque branches, and the inexorable sealing of every hold and cabin. We have seen the desperate, futile fight of a crew trapped, their axes useless against wood that healed faster than it could be cut. And we have stood with the sea serpent's sailors, staring in silent awe at the monolithic, featureless husk that was once a ship, a testament to a biological process that defied every known law. The whispers of science offer us theories: a hyper-aggressive parasitic microorganism that compelled the wood to expand and calcify, or a unique form of rapid biomineralization, turning organic matter into stone. Yet these explanations, as compelling as they are, merely provide a framework for the how, leaving the profound, unsettling why unanswered. The Vliegen de Honde compels us to ask, was it merely a biological anomaly, a freak confluence of unknown life and environmental conditions? Or did that terrifying, consuming growth fulfill a darker, more ancient purpose? Did the ship truly become a sentient, living entity, an organic leviathan that in its final monstrous form, achieved a terrible alien consciousness? The questions linger, drifting like the silent, impossible derelict across the vast, unexplored currents of the deep. The ocean holds secrets that defy our understanding and challenge our very sanity. What do you believe became of the Vliegende Hond Oldeens Hamarmau? Or perhaps you know of other maritime mysteries where the natural world turned against man in an impossible, terrifying way. Share your thoughts and your own chilling tales in the comments below. And if you dare to explore more of the ocean's profound enigmas, join our investigation. Like this video and subscribe to our channel. The Abyss always calls.